Inspirations. Well, I knew from the beginning I wanted to write my own scene, and from there I had a look at some of my favourite films to see if I could gain some inspiration from that. You know, a simple talking scene, 2 characters, and see if I could either just adapt from it or recreate it. But I knew I mainly wanted to recreate my own one. So I had a look at a few of some of my favourite films, but they none of them. Some of them were either overdone or just completely implausible to do. So I thought, right, okay, let's go back. I had a list of a couple of other plots, just simple, small ideas that I wrote ages ago, and I settled on one that I thought might be able to work. So I then thought, right, what can I also use to inspire it? And I looked at Robert Downey Jr. in The Singing Detective, and from what I could gather from the trailer of Birdman, if that's an inspiration, I wanted to see if I could write something that can interest people and can get people wanting to watch it, because that's the first step towards really achieving that goal. So might as well start now, and this was a perfect opportunity to use it. Spine of the story is a desperate screenwriter who's just come back home from a pitch to producers about his big action epic that he once bought, and he's in his flat and he's trying to arrange all his different scripts that he's written into separate piles. But whilst he's doing this, he's receiving guidance about why his film was so bad from his imaginary friend, who also happens to be the main character of his film, Johnny Iron. Ooh, key moments. One of the key moments at the beginning, although I'd say it's in a shot, where Matt Crawley, the writer, is walking around his flat, and he stops to look at a couple of his pages from his opening sequence, and there is one wide of the whole room, and you can see from the very start there is no one else in there but him. And this starts off him talking to another person which we haven't seen yet, and then a few exchanges later we eventually see who it is. So it isn't meant to be a twist in any way. Another part would be at the end, or near the end, when Johnny finally has enough of Matt not realising how ridiculous his script is, and he stands up, and you can see the height difference in them both, and yet he's just a figment of his imagination, and he still has to look up at someone, and he tells them that you're just awful right now, you need to get some inspiration and whatnot. But that gets cut off by someone else, his neighbour Anthony, who tries to just get him out, having an evening out. And that'll be another turning point of it, because this is where Matt has to talk to Matt has to talk to Anthony. Not only that, try to seem as normal as he can, whilst also talking to Johnny, who obviously doesn't exist. Yeah, the turning point in it would be after Johnny just gets fed up of Matt believing that his story is amazing, when it absolutely isn't. But he's been with him for so many years. He's heard this. He's heard his delusions before. He's heard how fantastic he thinks it is, and it's just at this point. This isn't like a turning point where he's saying, "I'm fed up of you. I don't want to be inside your head anymore." It's just for that evening, he just thought, right, forget it. I've got to yell at him. That will help him at least in some way to what he thinks it will do. But again, at the same time, you have to think that this is Matt convincing himself at the same time. It's like two sides of the same brain fighting it off. Alright, okay, well, Matt's the desperate screenwriter with a split personality disorder, and since his youth he wanted to make a big action film, and that all started when he wanted to get away from his kind of lonely, isolated childhood, and he created this amazing, brilliant super spy, who in turn is a better version of himself, a confident, suave, well-dressed person that he wants to be, but he never had the courage to just step out there and try it. But he didn't have the courage to do it. And his motivation throughout the whole scene is trying to understand why his script isn't very good. He believes it is. Johnny's motivation, Johnny Iron's motivation is to convince Matt that his script is awful, and that he should just forget this action epic and start writing something that he can do. Because what Matt is very talented in is writing romantic musicals. He's already written one before that got people talking. Obviously, Matt is not interested in it because he just wrote it just thinking, oh, I can try this, I might as well give it a go, and it was for someone in his writing class. And Johnny's trying to convince him, he used it as an example to try and convince him, this is what your talents are, use them and forget this action nonsense that you don't need anymore. Well, this is the thing with Matt's mental state. His subtext is Johnny Iron, and he's telling him constantly that Matt already knows that he needs to stop doing something like this, but he's quite repressed and he still can't get out of this 12-year-old boy's mindset. And there's a part of him that is saying, yes, you have to get out of this, but that hasn't got to the surface yet, and hasn't broken through this year's worth of almost mental blocking that he can't go any further, and he doesn't want to go any further, and he's caught in this zone that one part of his brain is trying to get him out of, but the other half is not having it. So I used a GH4 camera, and at first I found out that it shoots in 4K, which I thought that's a step in the right direction, because I've worked with a C100 before and a Blackmagic, and I've seen what those two can do, and if it came down to it, I would have used one of those to film it. Fortunately, I managed to find a cameraman who had the equipment with him, and with that I was able to see what it was like to use a GH4, and I thought it gives the picture a lot more resolution. So the crew for this, fortunately, I managed to find Lucas Sinkevicius, who has the GH4 camera, and that provided all the shots with the best resolution and whatnot. And he also had a Ronin with him as well. That provided a different take on how it was shot. One character was static all the time, but for Matt it was all done on a Ronin, and we did one long take where he explained the opening sequence, and we were meant to be moving around with him to symbolise that what's happening, what he's explaining is quite dangerous and whatnot. We're meant to fall into his nutty script, and that was meant to just give a bit of depth and a bit of movement to it. I managed to find Drew Johnson for sound, and he just managed to do that extremely well. Everything sounded right, and he had the right equipment with him, including not only just the boom mic and pole, he had the lapel mics. We managed to, actually in this shot, we managed to fit on, Johnny managed to fit it under his tie, and a couple of times we did it under the collar, and then some were just straight in front of the tie as well. We also did the same for a third character who was the supporting one, and depending on the frame, we managed to get the mic just below it, and that was all the sound was picked up as cleanly as possible, which extremely helps when it comes to editing. For the locations, I wanted to use a flat, something that a student would live in, somewhere quite small and a bit cramped, nothing special, just somewhere where someone would live for a while before moving on to the next place, either a year at university. Fortunately, I managed to find one, and it was quite a spacious place, great for the camera movements and whatnot. And I think we managed to convey it was a small, tight area, and it was quite a small place, which I hope we managed to do. For the costume, Matt was meant to be, he'd just come back from the producer, so we had what he thought, what I'm dressed in, this looks professional enough. He doesn't really care about fashion, so it was just like black trousers, black shoes, shirt, and he undid his tie, so it was just hanging over his shoulders. For Johnny, it was his smartest suit he could find, in just to show the difference in person. Matt doesn't really care about his appearance, and yet Johnny is the polar opposite and dressed to the nines all the time. At the beginning, I knew who I wanted it to be Matt Crawley. It was the Johnny Iron character that I had the hardest trying to find. I sent out an advert on Casting Call, and a couple of people replied, but I didn't feel as if they were quite the part. I still had a lot of time at this point, so I thought, right, I'll give it a bit more time, maybe more people will apply to it. At the same time, I had no idea if my actor was going to reply back to being Matt Crawley, if he was going to take the role I offered him. So I made another advert for Matt Crawley on Casting Call. When I sent it out, my actor finally got back to me saying he could do it, so I thought, great, but at the same time, I've sent an advert out there for, a character they can't play. But I used that anyway. I thought, I can get them to come in and read both characters, and then tell them the situation, and I'd see if they were better for another role. Hopefully one of them would be Iron. Which is what happened. One person came in, and I recorded them doing a read-through of both characters. But I thought he suited Iron a lot more, which is very fortunate. And he read Matt first, then Iron. But I thought the Iron it suited him better. It suited his physical appearance and his mannerisms. Actually, I think one of my favourite clips was actually, it was a shot. It was a close-up of Johnny when Matt's explaining his story, and there's one bit where he's explaining about these mutated tigers, and Johnny just does a quick look to the camera and raises an eyebrow, and I thought that it breaks the fourth wall, but also it just adds a little bit more humour to it, and it made it just seem a bit more friendly. Well, I met up with Lee Squires, and he and I went through all the shots of it, and he helped me get a plan together as what would happen when. And we decided to take it as it's a lot of back and forth. We'll set up the camera, and we'll go through the whole scene from one perspective, taking in what the actor's saying and their reactions. This then can be cut back and forth between them. We did that for both characters, the hardest one being Matt's one, and we did it right at the end, and we had a Ronin shot, and it was quite a long bit because he was explaining the opening sequence, and it was just very hard on the cameraman, who had to hold up for quite a long time, but he had to keep moving it around as well, which didn't help. The day before the shoot, I got the actors individually, and I managed to go through it with them what would happen, and I allowed them to explain how they would see the character and how they would say this line or that line. I managed to do it on the day as well, because we managed to cut out a bit of it as well. There was meant to be quite a few 2 shots right in the middle, but I was made aware that having one of the characters get up twice would dumb down the impact of it. So we managed to get up just once, so that's how we managed to have a long take of them just saying their lines and then reacting. It gave them a lot more time to rehearse for it, and it got them comfortable in the scene and with the lines. Organisation. I would have definitely improved organisation. It's quite tricky to, you think if you can plan it as best you can, but something will always go wrong right on the day, and that can be due to trains, it can be due to people, but we had to rush through a little bit of it, and we had to keep everyone going. I mean, there almost wasn't time for breaks and whatnot, so we had to just keep running through it. Anytime someone could, grab a drink or just, take a break from it, we did it then, whilst we were setting up for the next bit. But that's the only thing. If we had, say, we only had 1 day in the location, but if we had more than that, I think it would have been a bit more relaxing on everyone. We would have done half and half or so.